welcome everybody to our Scale and Secure Part 2. Today, we are going to be doing a deep dive into scaling and security. So just to go over the agenda really quick, first, we'll do team introductions. Then we'll go into an overview of scalability with Xano, where we'll talk about how Xano meets demand. Then we'll go into security with Xano, where we'll talk about importance of security. We're going to be going over some security features and best practices, and that includes doing some awesome demos for you all as well. Just a quick disclaimer here. If you do have any advanced questions or any questions that are specific to your project, we highly encourage you to join us for office hours. That is where we go really in depth and answer any questions and offer assistance. So let's jump into team introductions. My name is Liz, and I'm the Developer Community Manager here at Xano. I will also be your host today. Also joining us, we have Cameron Booth, Chris Coleman, and Michael Udinsky. So I do want to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. Cam, I will pass it over to you first.
Awesome. Hey guys, Cam here from Arizona. I'm in the middle of the desert. Been doing web stuff for a little bit more than 10 years now, and we're going to be presenting some security stuff today. Pass it over to Chris now.
Hello, my name is Chris. I'm the head of customer success and community here at Xano. I'm just super excited to be here, answer any questions that anybody might have, and show off some cool security-related features today.
And Michael, over to you.
Yeah, hey everyone. I'm Michael, the developer advocate lead here at Xano. So I'll be helping out answer questions in the chat and also afterwards. Excited for a great session. Thanks all for coming today. Let's get after it.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. So let's go ahead and get started with the first section of this, which is the scalability with Xano. And this is something that we did cover last week. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about how Xano scales to meet demand. But as we talk about this today, it is just important to know that each project has unique requirements and challenges. So for example, as we're looking at here, if we had a local pizza delivery application, it would probably operate under a moderate API load, and it's going to handle pretty straightforward tasks, right? Like order management and local deliveries. On the other hand, we could have an app like Uber Eats, right? Where it's going to experience a high API load. This application manages more complex data from more resources, and it requires complex algorithms to dispatch orders. They're probably doing some sort of like multi-restaurant aggregation and dynamic pricing. So this slide just kind of illustrates that there is no one-size-fits-all approach in application scaling. Really understanding the specific needs and complexities of each project is going to be the key in building effective and secure applications. So, how does Xano meet demand? Once users upgrade to the scale plan, they benefit from dedicated resources. This setup is great because it can manage lots of users all at once, and they can grow with your user base, reaching millions if needed. Now, there are a lot of nuances about scaling your instance to meet high traffic demands. However, there are two basic infrastructure components that can be scaled up, and those include API nodes and database nodes. So let's start by talking about API nodes. API nodes handle the business logic demands of your application. So if you can imagine thousands of users that are just looking at your app, it's probably pretty easy on the system. But once they all start using it heavily and hitting the API or complex endpoints, we need to add more API nodes. This way, your application doesn't slow down and keeps running smoothly. So I'm going to use an analogy here. If you think about scaling your application like hosting a big party where the number of guests keep growing, we can imagine API nodes are like the host of your party. when we just have a couple of guests show up, right? One host can probably manage all of the requests, like serving drinks, playing music, all that good stuff. But as more guests arrive, we need more hosts to keep up with all of the requests and ensure that everybody is having a good time without any delays. That's that's what API nodes basically do, right? They make sure that everybody's requests is being handled quickly, even when the load of people is increasing, right? More people that are showing up for the party, kind of like more people using your application at the same time. Now, jumping over to database nodes, they work a bit like API nodes, but database nodes power how many users can request information from your database at the same time. The more people that ask for data at the same time, the more database nodes that you need. So this makes sure that everybody gets what they need from your application without waiting too long. Now, going back to the party analogy, if we think of database nodes as the kitchen staff at your party, right? They're making the food. And if only a few guests are ordering food at a time, the kitchen staff that you have currently can probably manage quite well. But if everybody at the party starts ordering food all at once, we're going to need more staff to cook more food and serve food more quickly so that guests are not waiting too long. And database nodes work in the same way, right? They ensure that all of the data requests from your users are met efficiently, keeping your app fast and responsive. So now let's say that you have 100 million users, right, that are hitting the same endpoint at the same time. I just want to talk a little bit about database on horizontal scaling and what it means so that you can all understand and kind of visualize what this would look like, right? So horizontal scaling means that instead of storing all of the data on a single database server, the data is spread out across multiple servers. So this can be done through techniques such as sharding, where data is partitioned into different segments that are managed by different database servers. Some of the benefits of scaling this way is an increased capacity. So by distributing the data into multiple servers, those multiple servers can handle requests simultaneously, thus increasing the database system's overall capacity to handle operations. Also enhance reliability and availability. So with multiple servers, the database systems can continue to operate even if one server fails. And then scalability. As the need for handling more data and achieving faster response times grows, more servers can be added to the pool dynamically, allowing the database to scale according to demand. And I do have a graphic here that I thought was pretty cool just to kind of show you a little bit of what we are talking about here. So the arrows that we have up at the top, these represent incoming traffic or data requests from new users. Then this diamond shape that we have here is the load balancer that is going to distribute these requests across multiple servers so that no one server becomes overloaded. And then as we take a look at these servers here, we have some that are actively handling tasks and some that are ready to take on requests if the load increases suddenly. Now, in the last session, we did talk about when to start thinking about scaling. If you did miss that session, I highly encourage you to check it out. We do a deep dive into when and how to start considering scaling your project. Now we're going to move over to our securing with Xano section. So this is crucial to consider, right? Especially as you're starting to scale. We want to make sure that as your application grows, it also remains secure. So I'm going to pass it over to Cameron for this section.
Cool. So we're going to start getting into the importance of security in application development because security is important. There's some common security threats that we often see. We're dealing with data breaches or unauthorized access where people are able to get potential data manipulation or theft with that data, just taking it and running with it, and then vulnerabilities. And so what we want to be proactive, and there's a difference between well, we want to both be proactive and reactive. And there's a proactive, in this case, ultimately, we want to stress the importance of the proactive security measures over reactive responses to incidents. We want to sort of get in front of it before it happens. That's ultimately what we want to do here. So what we'll be getting into this next bit here is our security features and best practices. Chris and I are going to be going ahead and alternating here. I'll be talking about what's on the slides, and then Chris will actually be demoing for us. So we'll be talking about security and best practices. So getting started here, we'll start with secure data storage or encryption at rest. And it's important that the data is encrypted. And in this case, it's encrypted on a physical storage device in a physical location. So the implication here is that if somebody was to even get this hard drive, well, first they'd have to get the hard drive, but then, of course, they would need to still be able to decrypt it. And that's particularly difficult because, well, these encryption keys are elsewhere. So we have a scenario here on the slide. And in this healthcare scenario, let's say if there even was to be a break-in and the data is stolen, well, that hacker would, like I said, still need those decryption keys. So it's highly recommended by experts, and there's government regulation surrounding it. So ultimately, safe to say that secure data storage, well, at Xano, we implement this here and have encryption at rest. So you can take solace in the fact that your data is safe. We also are going to be talking about secure data transmission. So this is something we're probably all a little familiar with, and even if we don't understand the particular acronym, but what it is, we're going to be talking about SSL. And so we've probably seen this before in our browser address bar where we see the HTTPS. Ultimately, what it is security, sort of like a security guard on the internet. The security guard in this case, or the SSL, they're going to encrypt that information so only the intended recipient can read it, keeping your data safe during transmission from a web server to a web client. That data is going to be encrypted. It's like an envelope, I suppose, as it travels across the internet. So it just ensures that your data is safe, all your personal info, those credit card details that you're entering, everything remains safe. And like I had said, the best marker to determine whether or not you're using SSL is to take a look at the address bar in the top left of your browser, where you'll typically see that padlock and an HTTPS text. Sweet. And so for our security policies, Xano has a couple things that we do. We do a whole bunch with security, but we have a bunch of cool features and tools, one of them being the security policy. So the security policy is going to very easily allow you to select how individuals are going to access your instance. And we also have an activity logout, authentication services, 2FA, and SSO. So you have the ability to say, well, I want these people to access via this way, or I want to have this organization with your SSO for further organization connectivity. So you have the ability to really restrict and allow certain people or certain ways to access your instance. And then also you'll see there in the bottom, we have that IP address management, which is super cool because that allows us to allow and deny certain IP addresses. So just a lot of granular control over how people can access your instance. And we have also, which is, you'll probably hear it referred to as RBAC, or role-based access control, which is an awesome security mechanism to ultimately manage the user permissions based on roles within an organization. It basically ensures that just team members can access only the resources necessary to them. It comes with the ability to add, delete, and assign roles, and the instance owner can modify team members and the roles as the project needs change. So it's very granular and modular. You can go ahead and update it dynamically. And so it's super helpful to see a demo. And fortunately, Chris actually is going to be demoing this for us. So what I'll do is I'll let him share his screen and we'll go from there.
Cool. So we should all be seeing my screen here, looking at a Xano instance selection. Awesome. So I'm going to take you through just a quick tour of the RBAC features, which, as Cameron stated, allows you to essentially manage your team's permissions as they work inside of your project. So to start, we're going to go to our instance settings here, and we're going to choose this permissions RBAC option. And so this takes us to the permissions center, where first we can see that I have 4 team members on my workspace. This double of me is not an error. I actually have 2 user accounts going for this demo. And we can see all of the different permissions that we have available. So we can modify database, content, which is just like anything else that is in your database, basically. API groups, functions, add-ons, tasks, your files library, the Connect Center. So we have all sorts of granular permissions that are available for you to modify. We also have support for permission roles. So by default, you are provided 5 roles once you get started with RBAC. So that's admin, which just has full access to everything. We have our developer role, which is full access to everything in your workspaces, but they can't modify specific like instance settings. So like that security policy, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure something like that would fall under that umbrella. We have read only, which as the name implies, allows you to look at everything, but not change anything. We have suspended. So, whatever the story is there with your team member, you can quickly suspend their access if you need to. And then finally, we offer a billing role. So if you have specific people on your team that are just handling invoicing, they can still access the parts of your instance that they need to get that information. We can also, of course, add custom roles. So I'm going to show you how that works. So I'm going to click Add New Custom Role, and I'm going to call this role, we'll call this Dev No Live Data. And this is a very popular thing that we see a lot of people doing where they will have developers who have access to their projects, but they don't want those developers to be able to touch anything on the live data source, just to make sure that we're not impacting anything that's actually happening in production. So we can see they have full permissions now, and that's okay. But I'm just going to go and I'm going to modify this one permission here. Go ahead and hit apply. And so now this role has full permissions except for our live data. And now I want to apply that to my team. So I can just go back here, click these 3 dots and choose manage team roles. I'm going to choose that new role that I just created. And I'm going to give that to Cam and Liz. So we'll click apply. So we have the ability to bulk adjust the roles for our various team members. The last thing that I want to show here is more about granular permissions. So let's say Cam here, he's one of our developers who doesn't have access to live data, but we actually need Cam. He sent us a DM in Slack and he's like, hey, I really need the live data source. So we can just go here and we can give him those permissions. And these are, of course, individual create, read, update, and delete. So maybe we only want him to be able to read that live data. So he gets all of the rest. He's inheriting the rest of the permissions from his dev no live data role, but he does now have read access to that live data source. And we do, of course, note those people who have customized permissions in different colors, just for easier visibility there. And that is RBAC in Xano.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. One day I'll get live data. Maybe. Awesome. Well, what I want to talk about now is password encryption. This is one of the cool things, they're all cool things, but I really like what actually happens with password encryption. So we don't store that password anywhere. We use SHA-256. It's a security algorithm or a cryptography algorithm. Ultimately, it's going to hash your password and provide a strong one-way encryption. What we do then is we salt this password. So ultimately, when you're entering your password in plain text form, we add a little bit of some random data to it and then hash it, which we then store next to your username in your table. And so what we do is we never store that password, but we hash it. And well, now anybody who gets any access to anything of your user account or anything, they're not going to see your password. And it's really, really important that we don't store these passwords. And you might have heard, around the internet, oh, these people have had a security breach and all of the passwords were in plain text. And well, now everything's compromised. And so we want to get in front of that. And we don't want that to happen. So we use SHA-256 with unique salts, and it prevents these passwords from ever being really able to be cracked. And so super, super helpful to have this technology implemented. We have this example here, this social media example. So passwords are leaked due to a security breach, but the passwords are encrypted with SHA-256 and unique salts. So the outcome here is that these passwords do remain secure. Unauthorized access is ultimately prevented. And so it's super, super cool. And what I want Chris to be able to do here next is sort of showcase what that looks like for us. So I'll give the screen back to Chris for us.
I feel like you should have done like the salting motion. Isn't that a chef that like this is like this?
The salt bay.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
All right. So the first thing I want to show, as Cameron stated, we do not store the passwords in plain text. Obviously, that would be terrible. With the password field that we have available on the database tables, you can see that as we're viewing this database table, we're not able to see any of those passwords. They're fully obfuscated. But we can, of course, go to an API endpoint here. Let me find the right one. So we have this endpoint called get users, which just queries records from our user table. When you set up a query on a table that has a password field, that password field is not typically returned in the response. I did customize it here just so we could go ahead and see that data. But if we did enable that field and we actually run this endpoint, you can see what these passwords actually look like. So this is the hashed and encrypted version of those passwords. And it is not, the point here is to demonstrate that even if the worst thing were to happen, which is that somebody did access your user data without proper authorization, they would not be able to access the user's accounts because this is obviously not this user's actual password. This is an encrypted and salted version of it. So we know that those user accounts do stay secure, even in the worst case scenario.
Sweet. Thanks for that demo. And we'll head into single tenancy. So what is single tenancy? Well, it's yours. The data is yours. You're on a dedicated personal environment and it ensures that you're separated from others. So there's definitely a lot of benefits here. We have the data separation. So no shared resources or data with other tenants. Enhanced security. It reduces the risk of cross-tenant breaches and improved performance and reliability. It's just optimized or it optimizes system resources and stability for intensive use. And we have this little scenario down below with the financial analytics firm. So the company they require a high level of security for processing tons of data. And the solution here is that the single tenant deployment or our architecture provides an isolated environment just for them to support their specific high demand applications. This is going to minimize ultimately risks from shared resources. So that's the single tenancy. And then we're moving on to middleware, which is a really cool feature that we recently just released. But middleware is it's an intermediary layer that processes requests and data transfers between the front and the back end of an application. It's basically a way to segment your business logic to where you have your APIs. That API endpoint logic will remain there, but you can use middleware before that endpoint to process other things and to ensure that maybe certain users can see certain things or maybe they can't. So it ultimately enhances security and operational efficiency. Its key functions, we have data validation. So it ensures that all data, incoming data, meet security standards. And we have the request handling, which efficiently manages the flow of requests between users and then the servers and databases. We have the mobile gaming app scenario. And Chris is actually to go ahead and demo this and show us what middleware looks like. So I'll go ahead and let him do that. And it's a very cool demo.
Right. So let's talk about middleware. So the scenario is that we have a mobile game that is using Xano as its backend. We just launched, everything's great, but we have a bad actor who is very suspiciously climbing to the top of our leaderboards with just like an impossible score. And the way that they're doing that is they can intercept, the traffic on their end using whatever device and software that they choose to. And they can look at this API request that we're making to our Xano backend to update a user's score. So I know it's a little bit small here, but we can see the score is 15,000 right now. So this is what this person is doing. They're just constantly making requests and updating that score. So now we're at 20,000 and we can keep going as high as we want and get to the top of those leaderboards. Obviously, we want to prevent that. And this is not the only endpoint that we have that does functionality similar to this. Maybe there are different endpoints for different scoring types, just depending on the game. I didn't really get too far into that part of the example, but hopefully the point is clear that we need to secure this and all of our other endpoints as quickly as possible. So how do we do that? Well, I built a couple of custom functions to handle this process. So this first function is called check key. So basically what happens is each user has an encoded and encrypted key stored in the database with their user record. When a request is made to this function, we check the user ID and we check the key that's provided and we make sure it matches. If it matches, then we can continue. If it doesn't, then they get this invalid action error. Now, this key is one-time use only, which means we also need to generate them a new key. So after the request is made, we take that user ID once again, we create the key and we encrypt it, and then we add it to that user record, replacing the old one. And then this key is also delivered to the application so that when the request is made, the application can store that key, but the user isn't really able to generate it on their end because of the encryption that we've employed here. So we know that essentially each transaction is now verified. Now, we have these custom functions and we're ready to go, but let's just say, as an example, we need to put that custom function into all of these endpoints. And that's going to take a long time. I don't even have that many here, but if this was an actual application, we could have hundreds of these, right? And our app is live. We don't want to take it down or anything like that. We just want to get this functionality implemented as quickly as possible. That is where middleware comes in. So the cool thing about middleware is I can go to my workspace dashboard here, go to my settings and go to middleware, and I can add a pre-middleware, and I already have those functions inside of my middleware function stacks. So pre-middleware will essentially run before your function stack. So we're going to add that check input to our pre-middleware, so that checks the key to make sure it's good. And post-middleware will run right before a response is delivered, which will generate that new key. And so with just a couple of clicks, I have now applied that middleware across all of the endpoints in all of my API groups everywhere. It is immediately live and ready to go. I don't have to go through and edit each one and publish my changes and all that. It's good to go. It's already happening. Now, you do, of course, have more customization options for middleware. So let's say, as an example, maybe I have multiple API groups and I want middleware to work in every API group except this one. That's okay, because I can just go to the middleware settings and I can check this customize box and we can remove those middleware, or we can add different ones if we want to for this group. And we can also do that at the API level. So, let's check out this login endpoint. I'm not going to be checking a key during a login function, right? The user isn't even playing the game yet. So we can go to middleware and we can go ahead and customize. But we probably want this to generate a new key after they're logged in. So I'll keep that one running. And we'll publish the changes to this specific API. So now we've customized it at an API group and a single API level, even though it is applied to our entire workspace. So you have a lot of flexibility here to very quickly deploy solutions to secure your application, to verify data, to do anything it is that you need to do. You have all the same power that you have in your function stacks in your middleware. So if we go into one of these here, the inputs are static. So we just get all of these. So this is a pre-middleware. So we get the variables that are, or the inputs that are coming into that API, and we can work with those inside of the function stack and then return new inputs. We can replace the inputs. We can merge this response with the inputs, and we can do the same thing for the responses. We can replace the response. We can merge our middleware returns into it. There's a ton of flexibility and a ton of options here. The other cool thing that I want to point out about middleware is error handling. So we actually have an option here to determine how middleware behaves when an error occurs. So maybe you have a middleware function, it does a certain thing, but it's okay if that thing fails. Maybe as an example, and this is kind of counterintuitive to the scenario, but let's say that if this check key fails, I don't want to stop the user from using the application. I can change this exception mode to silent. And when I do that, that means that if this function failed for whatever reason, so if their key is not validated, the API will still execute. If I wanted this middleware to stop the person from being able to make that request, I can change this to critical. And that means that the execution will halt and it will not actually proceed into the rest of that API endpoint. So that is just a quick little demo on middleware.
Thank you, Chris. Middleware is super cool. Appreciate you and that demo. So we just talked about middleware. Perfect. We're going to now talk about private file storage. So private file storage is, well, storage that's on demand. Well, let me rephrase. One of the key features of private file storage is on-demand URL generation. So you have your files, but maybe you don't want everybody to access them all the time. So what we do with this private file storage is generate a temporary URL. And it's not permanent, it is temporary. So it allows you to have the time-sensitive access. These URLs will expire after a set period, enhancing that security by limiting, ultimately, the window of access. And so in this example here, we have this law firm example. They need to share a bunch of sensitive documents, and, well, they need to control who can view them and for how long. So utilizing the private file storage allows them to distribute these sensitive legal documents without having to worry about, well, them being exposed forever or indefinitely. It is temporary. Chris also has another demo for this, so I'll let him share his screen yet again, and we'll be able to see this real time.
All right, so moving back over here. So I'm just going to give you a quick tour of file management in Xano. So right now I'm in my public files library, and when a file is stored in your public files library, that means it has a URL that is always accessible. So if my user is poking around in our app and they harvest the link to this key hook here, this link will always be valid no matter what I do, until I go into my files library and I actually delete this file. If I was to delete this, then of course that link will not work anymore. But the issue here is that somebody could take these public links and they could distribute them as much as they want to, and that can be a problem depending on what you're storing in your application. So that is why we have this private files library available as well. So I have an image uploaded here, and we can still look at it here in Xano, but there is no public URL to this file. We actually need to generate a URL that has a time expiry value set to it. So the image will become available during that time, and then after that, that link will not work anymore. So I'm going to show that to you right now. So if I go to this private files endpoint, we use this function called private file sign URL. We provide the path name, which you can just get by querying your database, whatever record that file is stored in, that path will be there. And then we set a TTL, which is how long in seconds that link is valid for. So I have this set for 10 seconds right now. So when I run this, I'm going to copy this URL. I'm going to erase the clock to open this in a new tab. So here's my my sample image here. And if we just give it a few more seconds here, just make sure that I'm not that I'm past my 10-second window. So it's probably good. And we refresh this. You can see we now get an error. It says the provided token has expired, and we are no longer able to access that image. If we wanted to access it again, we would have to generate a brand new URL. So we can copy this brand new link, and it still works. But if we were to sit here for another 10 seconds, this link would expire as well, and then we would not be able to access that image anymore. So that is how private files work in Xano.
Sweet. Thanks for that demo, Chris. Then lastly, we have our compliance center. So our compliance center, the whole entire purpose of it really is to have a system where we can track all of the modifications to our workspace. We monitor a couple different things that we're considering what we call here workspace objects. We have the database tables and schema, API groups, API endpoints, add-ons, custom functions, and background tasks. It is ultimately an audit log. It allows us to see who did what and when. And so in this particular scenario, we have a healthcare software scenario where, well, we need to meet rigorous regulations. We need to have a bunch of logs that show the changes and allow us to be able to see what happened when. And so the compliance center that we have allows us to do exactly that. We have the ability to see this user did this at that time, or this user did this at that time. So we'll go ahead and pass it one more time over to Chris, where he will demonstrate this for us.
Awesome. All right. So This is the compliance center. We get to the compliance center by going to our workspace dashboard. We'll click these three dots here and we just choose compliance center. We have two sections available right now with more on the way very soon. So the compliance center, as Cameron stated, is essentially just an aggregation of any activity that your team members have taken inside of this workspace. The two sections that we have available now are middleware reporting and version history. I'll take a look at version history first. So we can see as we scroll down here, we have some endpoints listed, API groups, functions. This is a task here, and we can see the user who modified that, when they did it, and what branch they were on. The typical flow here would be to, let's say we want to take a look at this endpoint, for example. We want to know what Chris Coleman did to that. So when we click on this, we can go right over to the version history and we can see that previous version right there. And as Cameron stated, this tracks changes all over your workspace. So it's very helpful for auditing, team members' actions. We also have middleware reporting. So middleware reporting just gives you a bird's eye view of how middleware is applied across your workspace, which is super helpful, just really based on kind of the power that comes along with using middleware and how quickly you can improve or unfortunately break things depending on what's in that stack and how well it works. So we have statistics here based on that tell me that I have middleware applied to 4 functions, 1 task, and 20 APIs. And we can dial down a little bit more here. So we can see, for example, on this default API group, we can see that has customized middleware, that is customized pre-middleware. So when I was showing you how you could change individual objects. So this will give you just a quick overview of that. So you can understand where the middleware is not applied. And we can do the same thing for functions and tasks as well. So that's kind of what the Compliance Center is about. It's really just a high-level overview of kind of the state of your application and the actions that are being taken during development.
So I do see some questions here in the chat that we can discuss. Tomas, I don't see that we have answered those questions, so I'll start with those. Can you switch files from using public to private storage and vice versa?
It's a little bit of manual labor right now. There's not like a button to switch those files around or anything. That would be a really great feature to have. You can do it in just a function stack with a couple of steps, and we actually have a video coming to our YouTube channel pretty soon that demos exactly how to do that.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Next question. What is the best security practice in terms of API groups management? How do you decide when to create a new group, for example?
It's a good question. I would love to hear from the rest of the Xano team on this. For me, I think API groups are more of an organizational tool than anything else. You typically don't want to dump all of your APIs in one API group because then it probably just makes it harder to find certain things. From a security standpoint, it would be important to note that your API groups have different canonical IDs, which are auto-generated, and those are part of the URL. So if you did want to kind of separate out certain specific APIs and give them a little bit of modification in their links as well, you could do that, separating through API groups, but definitely would love to hear from anybody else who has opinions here.
Yeah, I gave an example in the chat for Tomas, like exactly like you said. I kind of think of it as a organizational standpoint. Like if I was, building a particular app and I had a handful of API endpoints that, for example, only like admin users are going to use, I might like to separate those just so as I'm going through development, if I need to, make any kind of modifications to the general admin flow, I know where they all are in one place. And those are kind of separate from, my general endpoints that, users might be utilizing. So that's one way you might want to think about it.
Thank you, Chris and Michael. Next up, what will happen if we will have if there's a bad actor DDoSing our Xano URLs? Are there any security measures already in place?
A great question. So it does depend a little bit on the Xano plan that you're on. We showed off the security policy earlier. So that is a great option right away because you can just immediately revoke access from their, by their IP address. That's not just for like team members accessing your workspace. That will also stop API requests from coming in from that IP address. You could also use middleware to achieve almost the same effect by reading the IP requests from the request headers and just immediately kicking them out, if that's something that they're doing. And then, of course, if you were to, if you need like more customized like security features and functions, on our enterprise plan, we have things like Google Cloud Armor that you can deploy as an additional layer to protect you against those.
Thank you, Chris. Lots of good questions here in the chat. We have a couple from class. Is there a proposed way of load testing your API calls? Currently using loadster.io, but something built in would be even cooler. Yeah, I don't know if we have anything in the pipeline to test out like load testing API. Do you guys know of anything in the pipeline?
I think we've talked about it, but I'm not sure if anything is actually in the works yet. I don't know, Michael, if you have any info there.
Yeah, no, not currently anything being actively developed on, but it is for sure on our radar, and we realize kind of the importance of it. I think when we do create that feature or some kind of feature that addresses that, we want to make sure to kind of get it right. So nothing yet, but is definitely on our radar.
Awesome. Thank you both. And we do have the feature request board in our community. Stuff like this, like you can search on there. And if it's not there, we would love to see it as well. Any great ideas like this. And the next question is a manual start for auto scaling plan. For example, a use case would be like a ticketing system. You know that from 11, you will have a massive spike in users that want to buy a ticket.
Not presently. That might be something available on an enterprise plan, depending on where your cloud is. Not 100% sure on that. I will say that I'm like obsessed with that as a feature request, though. I think it's great for our plans that have auto scaling enabled. It would be really cool to be able to schedule that. That's a really great idea.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, class, for the idea. Perfect. Tomas, I have another question. Let's see. A bit sci-fi question here, but just curious. Is it possible to build an end-to-end encrypted app with Xano? I assume not, but I wonder what your comment is on this. I think I saw a question on this, right? Like for a chat. But yeah, wondering if it's possible to build something completely encrypted.
I feel like it would be. And this, I would probably want to do a little bit of research before I gave like a for sure answer to this question. But, the idea of an end-to-end encrypted app would be that, if I'm sending a message on my phone, that message is encrypted on my phone. It goes to the backend, and the backend would, like a chat app, deliver it to the other person while it's still encrypted, right? And then that other person's device would be able to decrypt that message. I have some thoughts about how that would work. I feel like the answer is ultimately yes, though. The biggest kind of like the biggest potential flaw that I see there is like your request history. So if you had messages that were being encrypted only in Xano, you could see those messages in your request history if you have that enabled, right? So you lose that idea of end-to-end encryption. But if your application can encrypt it, send it to Xano. Xano can deliver that same encrypted value over to the destination. And then I guess you would need to make sure that Xano doesn't ever get a hold of the keys that would be used to decrypt those messages. Again, not a developer, not an engineer, just kind of spitballing here. It definitely seems possible, though, and I actually just added it to our content board because I definitely want to look into that a little bit more and give you guys some resources if we can make it happen. But I feel like we can.
Yeah, a couple great points, Chris. A couple comments there. I think now in request history, we have a way to mark sensitive data, or that might be coming if it's not already released.
That's true. Yeah.
That was a Chris Nurse request there. And then for the encryption key, that's always a really good point. I've heard Ray Deck talk about this during office hours, so I hope I kind of don't butcher it. But there's kind of different levels of I guess storing a key, right? As the developer of the app, if you have it stored like in an environment variable in Xano, technically you could go in there and look at that key. Now, is that secure enough? Maybe, probably, but maybe not. So if there's a case where for compliance reasons you do need to store it outside of Xano, then you do have to kind of take that into consideration to kind of call that key, make sure it's even not viewable in the request history at kind of any point to you while it's encrypting and decrypting that data.
They're really interesting. It's going to be really interesting to try to build that. Thank you so much for the questions. I think this is really great stuff.
Awesome. Thank you, Thomas. I hope we answered that question. Let us know if you have any follow-up thoughts or other questions in the chat. We have another question here. Could we at some point train AI models within Xano?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be able to store some data at least, but training seems a little interesting to approach it through Xano by training. We can definitely help with storing the data. I know that we're starting to explore like embeddings and looking at ways to take that data and put it within the AI. So I know that we're getting to a point where we could at least let you leverage AI functionality or at least store the data inside Xano. That's as much as I can contribute to that thought, though, without speaking about things that I don't know too much. So I just wanted to say that.
Awesome. Thanks, Cameron. Chris, Michael, any thoughts on that?
Nope. I am.
Yeah, I don't know enough about actually training AI models to comment, but I will echo what Cameron just said in terms of we're exploring more ways to, do embeddings and things like that with Xano.
Oh, thank you. Great. I think that was the last question. We have 2 minutes left. Feel free to add anything in the chat and we'll just hang out for a little bit longer. I do want to say just thank you to everybody for joining us today and contributing to this discussion. The recording will be shared once it has been edited and ready to be released. We just want to make it look nice for all of you. So look for that in your email and in the community.
I do want to call out one more thing before we wrap. Michael posted it in the chat as well. We have a trust center located at security.xano.com. And this is a really helpful resource, not only for you as a Xano builder, to understand, all of the different certifications and compliances that we maintain. But, if you need, maybe you're building a healthcare app and you need to take a look at our HIPAA agreement, that's available on there as a sample, as well as our GDPR DPA. You can review progress on other compliance initiatives that we have going on. And this is also a really fantastic resource if you have clients or vendors that you need to answer, security questionnaires from. This will give you all the information that you need to provide those answers.
Awesome. Perfect. Of course, thank you everybody for joining us. We are at time. We hope to see you all next week and absolutely have a great weekend as well. Thank you, everybody.